Hi everyone, this is Rico Figliolini, host of Peachtree Corners Life and publisher of Peachtree Corners Magazine. Thanks for joining us tonight at 6 o'clock here at Atlanta Tech Park. Atlanta Tech Park is an incubator, it's actually an accelerator, a technology hub situated in Tech Park, Atlanta, which is a sponsor of ours, and this is where we're doing the podcast from. They provide a variety of things as far as workspace for almost 100 companies that can be here, conference rooms, areas to meet, like boardroom areas, and plus they do events every week. There's something going on here, whether it's a Friday financial meeting where they bring in venture capitalists or other people to teach how to get financing, or people that actually do financing. And they do Wednesday, Wine Wednesday, things like that, which is kind of neat. But really the big thing here is that it's all about tech, it's all about startup businesses and to accelerate your business. I want to thank them for providing that space to us. It's a great place to be, it's cool, it's a good place to collaborate. We have some guests today. Great, this is going to be a great conversation, I believe, about exercise and about friendship and about the way we can feel better every day. And we have our feature writer, Patrizia Winsper, that wrote our current feature story from Peachtree Corners Magazine in this issue. And you'll find it online, by the way, at livinginpeachtreecorners.com. So I'm going to turn this over to Patrizia. Patrizia?
Thank you so much, Rico. I'm so
Sure.
pleased to be here this evening. And every time I do a story for the magazine, just like I told the mayor the other day, I realize how many great things there are to love about living in Peachtree Corners. And I had the pleasure on this story of meeting 3 awesome citizens in our fine city. And let me just go ahead and go around and introduce you to them. Prudence Franklin. We have Prudence here, and she heads up the BGR group. I'll have her discuss that later and just give us the scoop on what BGR is. But Prudence, by day, is a software engineering director. Hi, Prudence. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you all so much for joining us in the midst of all the holiday crazy. Just take a little break and sit with us and listen to some feel-good news about what's going on in our great city. And then joining us here, we have Mr. JohnFerver. Tell me how you pronounce it, John. I know I messed that up. I'm pronouncing it in French, and I just can't unfrenchify it because I'm a French teacher by trade. So JohnFerver in my mind, but in yours, it's
I'll answer to almost anything, but generally we go by Fervier.
Fervier. Okay. And John, by day, you're a Waffle House executive, and then on your spare time, you head up the Renegade Runners in Peachtree Corners.
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay. Last but not least, we have Randy Bailey. Randy Bailey is a software sales engineer by day, and on his spare time, he heads up PC3, which stands for Peachtree Corners Cycling Club. Is that right?
That's close. Actually, don't call me a software engineer. You're going to scare all of my colleagues. I'm a software sales exec, so
Software sales
I
exec.
don't touch the engineering side, folks.
All right, we'll leave all the engineering up to Prudence then. All right, so let's start with our elevator sales pitch on what BGR is, Prudence.
Okay, so BGR is short for Black Girls Run. Now, I don't want anybody to be fooled by the Black Girls part of it, because this group is open to all women of all races, all sizes, all shapes. The Black Girl Run is a nationally based organization that started, and they targeted Black women because of the disproportionate number of Black women who have diabetes, high blood pressure, and who, and struggle with obesity. And a lot of women are intimidated by running groups. When you look at Atlanta Running Club and you look at people doing marathons and half marathons, there are these skinny people who are running and can do 7-minute miles. People are intimidated by that. And so BGR started so that they can reach women of all different levels. And
I can attest to that
yes.
because I joined your group and ran right down Peachtree Parkway one night.
There you go. And BGR, women of all levels and competency levels are welcome to join us. So we welcome walkers,
That's
people
wonderful.
who jog walk, people who run. And one of our motto is no woman left behind. So when the runners are finished, we all wait at the end for all the walkers and everybody to come in so that we can celebrate. and just let everybody know and feel their accomplishment and know that we're celebrating them for what they did at that particular time when we go out.
I love it. I love that Peachtree Corners is a diverse city and you welcome a diverse group of women, whether it's ethnicity or athletic ability.
Absolutely.
And I can attest to everything she said because it's true. Prudence was the most competent runner that evening and she ran circles around all of us.
And I'm not always.
And waited for the very last one to come back, and we were all welcome and made to feel great.
And any age as well. I mean, Corinne is what, in her 70s? And she comes out and she does great. And she, I think she spoke to you and that, she does it for the friendship, the camaraderie.
Right.
Her husband passed away years ago and she does this for, a social outlet. So, there's just so many functions that this thing performs
And
apart
we're
from
gonna-
fitness. So, yeah.
We're going to get into that aspect of these groups because obviously on the surface level it started off as, hey, let's do a story on some exercise groups in Peachtree Corners. And quickly I learned after a few interviews that there was a lot more involved than just the fitness and the physical fitness part of this component. So we're going to get back to that later. But I love how Black Girls Run started because of the, historical elevated levels of hypertension and heart disease among the Black women, right?
Among
African American
African Americans,
community.
yeah.
So, and then you've now opened it to empower all women.
All
Like,
women.
let's all get out there and let's all get
Absolutely.
healthy.
Let's
That's
all
awesome.
get healthy.
Okay. John, elevator spiel on the Renegade Runners.
Elevator spill. I hate to even call us a running group. Really, we've transitioned sort of from a running group, which leads you to believe that we are training all the time, to more of a social group that just likes to run, and running is the common link that a lot of us have together. But we have all levels of runners. We have a lot of different groups. Renegades, I guess, would be the overall name, but we have subgroups with different names. We have different levels of activity, all the way from runners to people that are really serious about it. We have people that have never run a marathon. We have people that have run over 50 marathons. So it's just a wide variety of people that enjoys each other's company, and we do a lot of things outside of the Saturday morning runs that are, we just had a Christmas party. And different groups have different Christmas parties. We get together for other events. We've traveled across the country together to run races, and so it's more of a social group anymore than it is running, although we still run. We still walk when we have to, and we just have a good time and enjoy each other's company together. So,
Why is that number 50 important? 50 marathons.
well, it's important to some people, not me, but there are a lot of runners whose goal is to run a marathon in every state. And we actually have somebody who was in our group who ran 50 marathons in 50 different states in the same year. We have.
Rico, are you feeling a little bit like we need
Athletic?
to? Yeah.
Athletic? No.
We're dropping the ball a little bit on the
I
athletic
do the
side
walk.
of
I
things.
do the walk and run. So I walk mainly and then run the cul-de-sac. That's about it.
Well, and our group does the walk-run method too. We transitioned away from the Galloway group many years ago. So we have runners that have run just a few marathons, some that just run one marathon. I've run 12 marathons. We have them that have run 30 marathons. So it's we have all different levels of running. We have people that only run 5Ks and 10Ks. So it's whatever you feel like doing. In fact, our motto is do whatever the hell you want.
Got
And
it.
so it's
You got a shirt with that on it? You need one if you
That's
don't.
a terrific
it's a
idea,
common
right?
thing. We've changed quite a bit. We're not quite as structured as what the Galloway group was, and that was the genesis of our, like I said, our motto. And so one example is the Galloway group does something called the Magic Mile, where all the runners run a mile, and your time on the mile dictates what group you're in for your pace group. We turn that into Mimosa Mile. So we go out and run and come back and do mimosas in the parking lot.
That sounds like what I would be in.
So it's-
I would be in that group.
So we do another one with screwdrivers at the end of the run. I won't tell you what the name is on that one. But,
So that's what I see in the back of the cars.
that was actually my birthday recently. Yeah, we had screwdrivers. No, that was mimosas, but we've had screwdrivers after the run. So
That sounds like a fun group. I think maybe I'll join that one.
fun is the main part of it. If you can't have fun, or if you get upset about stuff, or you're thin-skinned, you wouldn't belong in our group at all. So.
What I love, and there is a common thread that unites all three of these diverse groups, is that we don't necessarily have to be intimidated, because that's what strikes a chord of fear in me. Like, how can I join these runners? They're athletes. I can't even run around the block without feeling like I'm dying, you know. But you have a bunch of different levels in your group. Sorry, where they. So we started with the.
Well, we have a walking group,
And what would we call them again? I
the
forget.
the Wild and Wonderful Walkers.
The Wild and Wonderful Walkers.
We have
And then there was the mid group.
yeah, my group is a 5-1 group, so we'll run for 5 minutes and walk for a minute, unless there's hills, and then we walk a lot more. And we're the Renegade Runners. We have our fast group, which is Lazy Sucks. And they run a little bit faster and a little bit longer.
And they run more marathons, right?
And then we have the slower group, which is the Slackers. And, you know, they're running well, roughly 2 minutes and then walking a minute at a little bit slower pace. So it's any pace group that you really want. And even my group, the Renegades, we usually break up into 2 groups to where you'll end up with some faster runners and some slower ones. And it's how you feel that day and how much you've had to drink the night before that really dictates your pace that day. So
Naturally.
Yeah.
So wonderful. So we don't have to feel intimidated. In other words, if we want to, you know, decide it's time to get active, it's time to meet some people in our community and join one of these groups, there's room for all of us at all different competencies.
Well, you know, we all started at 0. We did. At one time, none of us were runners, and we all ran our first mile. I ran my first mile and could barely make it. And, you know, you get to the point to where you're going out and running 10 miles, and it seems like nothing. And that sounds like a lot to people that don't run. But after you do it and get used to it, it's just normal.
Right.
So, but we all start at 0.
Fantastic. I love that. It's inspiring. Randy, tell us about PC3. Now we get a vehicle involved.
So as you said, there are a lot of parallels. As I listened to John and Patrizia, there are a lot of parallels in kind of what the glue that holds the group together. But PC3, just to give an overview of it, we've actually been a cohesive group for over 20 years. So we started with, back in the early 90s, to date myself, we started as a few triathletes that exchanged emails to figure out how we're going to ride together on Sunday. And then in the mid-90s, Fowler YMCA came to town, and Fowler supported our efforts. I got drawn into teaching spin classes and I can tell you, when somebody approached me as an outdoor cyclist and said, hey, I've got this great thing I want you to try. We're going to go in a room full of exercise bikes, turn on some music, and work out. And my reaction to that was, that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. Obviously, I'm not a good stock picker either, because I picked that one entirely wrong. But subsequently, I've taught spin classes at the Y for over 20 years, as well as other places. And we started at that point to become a real group. So people coming off the spin bike that wanted to take the next step, and people from the community that found out about us through the Y. So suddenly it became a real group. Today we've got over 600 members. So it's a pretty good sized group. We do primarily organized road rides from occasionally from the Y, but we're now starting our rides from Lifetime Fitness in Peachtree Corners, bigger parking lot, and also they're also very supportive of us. And again, like John and Patrice said, my group Prudence said, sorry. My group is made up of everybody from that, timid person coming out of spin class who just wants to dip a toe in the water, to multiple Ironman competitors and folks that have ridden across the country, done a 4,000 mile cross country ride, things of that nature. So it really is a mix of different kinds of riders, and we welcome everybody, whether you're a beginner or whether you're an Ironman triathlete. We do a lot of social events. The social aspect is really, really a big part of what we do. So we don't name our rides after drinks, so I'm going to have to rethink that.
He's
But that's a
giving you
great
brilliant
idea. I like
ideas.
that's sort of a branding thing, and it probably is a good marketing tool. So I like that strategy. We do often end our rides with a sort of a happy hour, which you've now earned from having been out and exercising for a few hours. But it's very social. We do Christmas parties. We do those kinds of things as well. So we want to welcome everybody into the group.
And something you shared with me when I first interviewed you struck me. You mentioned all the different levels once again, some beginners, right? Some pro athletes, and then some who are so athletic they're actually joining you on their off days. So you ride 20 or 30 miles,
This
they
is
come
true.
back and then put their bike in the car and go for a run.
We always have, we have a few nationally ranked cyclists and triathletes in the group, and it always makes me feel very sad when we get to an end of a ride and I have busted it as hard as I could go, and the person riding next to me, she says, well, that was a nice easy ride, now I'm going to go run 10 miles. So it's sort of it builds humility if nothing else, but yeah, that is true.
Absolutely, absolutely. We've already touched upon this just a little bit, Rico, but I'd like to share with you all a video of an interview I did with Councilman Ware Gratwick. He's actually the mayor pro tem, so he would step in for our mayor in the absence of Mike Mason, our mayor, in Peachtree Corners. So I'm dying to make the joke, Rico. I haven't done it with him yet, but I'm dying to tell him one day, who do you think you are, the mayor? How do you think that'll go? Do you think that'll work?
I don't know about that.
He seems like an easygoing guy.
Yeah, Ware would take it just fine.
It was actually Ware who inspired me to take a twist on this story. I realized quickly that it wasn't just about the physical activity that these different groups are involved in. It's actually about the bonds they're creating, the friendships they're creating in these groups. And then I started getting curious about it and did some research on loneliness. And I learned actually that loneliness is actually really bad for you. You can develop physical health issues related to loneliness just as easily as smoking, just as easily as hypertension. So it actually can shorten your lifespan. So this little clip that we're about to show here with Ware Gratwick talking about a 27-year friendship he's had with his dear friend, and his dear friend is Dr.
Gene Whitkin
Okay, you know
from My
him
Magic
personally.
Dental. So, yeah, they've had a good relationship.
They don't maybe want to admit that they've been doing stuff for that long, but they started running, then switched to cycling because it was a little easier on the joints.
Yes.
Um,
So why don't we go to that? Go ahead. Now, of course, we can't hear this, but it's coming up.
We go out for an hour, and usually we'll do that on average 3 or 4 times a week. And it's as much for physical exercise as it is for mental health, I guess you would say. We've had many deep conversations on many rides, everything from business decisions that we've both faced to personal things going on in our lives. And so, you know, it's been something I have always enjoyed, and it's been a big part of both of our lives, I think, for many years.
Wonderful.
And hopefully we'll be able to continue that. At some point, I guess we'll get too old to bike, and then perhaps we'll walk. We'll see.
And there's nothing wrong with walking. Walking is
Not
very
at all.
good for
I know
you.
there's several people around Peachtree Corners. We pass walkers all the time, so yes.
That's right, I was in one of those groups last week, running with the BGR group. I'm more,
Okay.
I have to be honest, I did less running and more walking. But it was
Well,
right
that's,
along Peachtree Parkway.
You know, it really is great that we've got a community where there are so many people that are able to participate in exercise activities that are out and about. And the city, I know, is working very hard to, extend both sidewalks as well as our multi-use trails throughout the city. And as we continue to expand those, that's going to be more opportunities for people to walk, jog, ride bikes.
Right, well, since you clearly have experience with this, and you must be in the know, why don't you tell us some of the great trails we should check out, whether we're biking or walking or jogging?
Well, I'll start at the top, which is, right here in Technology Park, where we have the autonomous vehicle track right out in front here. Part of Curiosity Lab, which, I know the magazine has done features on.
Yes.
And so as part of that autonomous track, we have autonomous vehicle lanes, which scooters are allowed in there. I'm sure bicycles are allowed in there. And we do have that's really the initial genesis of the multi-use trails, because we have widened sidewalks into where they're 12 feet wide, throughout Tech Park, so you can start there. And I know we're working to connect to the lakes back there. There's a couple of lakes back there where we'll have you can actually access. So if you want to get on that lake, it's big enough to probably canoe or kayak on. And so our multi-use trail will tie into there as well. And we'll continue around the loop around the city as it's a little bit of a slow process because you've got to find access to the property where you've got a right of way to put it through, and people have to want it there too. So
Right.
yes,
How long into the future are we talking
it's
about?
hard to guess. I don't know the answer to that question. As soon as we could possibly get there, I know that it's high on our priority list.
Okay. And in the area nearby, what are some good biking trails already?
Well, so biking trails, that's not biking trails per se, although, Simpsonwood Park is a great place to run, it's a great place to walk, and we do bike through there. But we tend to go through the neighborhoods, whether it's through North Manor, we can be seen there, we can be seen in Amberfield, we can be seen in Riverfield, and just different neighborhoods interior of the Peachtree Corners. So,
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sharing with
You're
us.
welcome.
I really
My
appreciate
pleasure.
it.
Have some good stories for us.
Okay, just
All right, so as you can see, developing those personal bonds with people, with friends, having confidants is actually just as good for your health as the actual exercise you guys are out there doing, right, with your groups. So Prudence, do you have some friendship stories or some stories that along those lines from the BGR group?
Oh, absolutely. Corey Valentine is another engineer who runs with the group. I mean, she and another lady by the name of Nakia, 3 of us are engineers, and one morning nobody else showed up, and except the 3 of us on a Saturday morning. And as we're running and we're sharing what we did, we realized all 3 of us are engineers, and we're like, what are the odds? Nobody else showed up except the 3 engineers. Anyway, so Corey Valentine and we formed a friendship. When we go out, we talk about our kids. I mean, I'm divorced, she's married. We give each other advice and comfort, and so we've developed quite a bond. Same thing with some of the other ladies. We might not have, we are not seeing each other often as much, but some of them live in my neighborhood, live in adjacent neighborhoods. One day, Debbie Vidalis, she took me something that she cooked, some meals, so I could try it. I mean, so yeah, I've been having some real friendship with some of the ladies.
When I ran with your group, I met, was it Corinda, the
Corinda,
70-year-old lady?
Yes.
And she shared with me how her husband's passed away, and she joins your group, besides playing on 2 different tennis teams, by the way. And I had a hard time keeping up with her. I'm not gonna lie. She's in way better shape than I am, okay? Let's be honest. But she shared with me that, she finds comfort in running with you guys, and the camaraderie is nice, because it must be lonely after being married for so many years to the same person and then suddenly losing him.
Right. Yeah. So one of the things we have, one of the goals we have, for me, I wanted to lose 10 pounds before the holidays, because usually I put weight on over the holidays and I'm giving myself some wiggle room. So one of the things we said after I got to my goal, we would all go dancing. And so that's coming.
Oh,
So-
awesome.
So that's something we're going to go do together.
Very good. Ooh, I might have to join you on
Remember
the
we talked about
dancing
that.
too. Yes. All right, John. So fitness is not just physical. Let's talk about what your group does in terms of friendships and bonds and socializing outside of just the exercise part of it.
Well, I have to go back to the losing weight part, because I always think about people that run and they want to lose weight for running or exercising or riding bikes or whatever. And I think about myself. I've been running now for over 20 years and gained almost 20 pounds. And actually, it's probably the only runner in America that actually gained weight running marathons. So it doesn't work for everybody.
Just imagine where you'd be if you hadn't
If
been
you
around.
hadn't
You'd
been
be-
around.
That's the key to it,
Exactly.
right there. It's amazing how much you actually, or how close you get to people when you spend that much time with them. And like I said, we've traveled all over the country together. We ran a marathon in Big Sur, California. We have run in Colorado. We've run in Utah. We've run in South Dakota and New York and just all over the country. Some of our runners have gone to Hawaii and Alaska and run. And so, and when you're spending the whole weekend or several days with people and you're out on the course for 5 or 6 hours running with them, you talk about everything. You run out of things to talk about. And so you end up talking about a lot of personal stuff and really getting to know people. And you become really good friends with them. Like I said, we go to parties together. We go out to dinner together occasionally. We do things like that. And we all have down times in our life when things happen, when you have tragedies in your family or sicknesses or whatever, and we're always there to support each other because we've known each other for a long time now. And even the new members of the group, well, they quickly integrate into the whole thing. And so I think that's really important. One of my favorite trips that I went on was to Sioux Falls, South Dakota. I think a half dozen of us went up there to run the marathon. And after we ran it, some ran a half marathon, some ran the full, but that evening we decided to go out to dinner together, and we got a car. And the guy showed up, and the first thing he did was open the trunk, and he had a full bar in his trunk. So we went.
It's all about drinking.
It's all about drinking with us. All about drinking. Always comes back to that. So we went to dinner, had a good time, called the guy up. He came and picked us up at dinner, and then we took a 2-hour tour of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, which is almost impossible to do unless you have a full bar in the back of the car. But it was just a great social exercise, type event.
I mean, is it just me? I'm just astounded that they can run and talk at the same time.
I would be stumbling.
The talking makes it so much easier, though. It does. The bad thing about running long distances is when you're by yourself and you don't have anybody to take it away, to help you through that and to send your mind someplace else. You got to think about the pain and all that. But when you're talking about it, you don't even think about it. I kind of, a long run to me is almost like going on a long car ride. You remember the start, you remember the finish, but you don't remember anything in between because you just zone out. And when you run for 4 or 5 hours or 3 hours, it's the same thing. You remember the start, the finish, and barely anything in between. And a lot of that has to do with the talking and the interaction with other people too, and it just makes it so much easier. And you think it's hard, but it's really not if you're running at the right pace.
It's funny to me. Okay, so I'm not a runner, obviously. I mean, I might drink, but I might not be able to run as well as you guys. Spin class, I like that idea though. Stationary, I don't have to get hit by a car.
And you can't fall off unless
That's right.
I've had 2 people fall off spin bikes,
Oh,
but
no.
it's you got to really work to fall
I
off a
thought
spin
that
bike.
only happened in the movies. That really
No,
happens.
real life examples. Yes.
There are people out there, I guess, that do that.
They had been drinking.
I had one guy who
Amy
came into my
Schumer.
spin class, and this guy was an avid mountain biker. Didn't know him when he came in, first spin class. And the flywheel makes the pedals keep turning, so you can't stop suddenly. And I'm trying to give this guy the sort of the coaching. Here's what you have to be aware of. And he just brushed me off and said, I know what I'm doing here. Well, about 10 minutes into the class, he got up to a high rate of speed, and he tried to stop. And literally, I kid you not, over the handlebars.
Oh.
Scared me. I thought the guy, injured
Oh,
himself.
no.
He left my spin class and never came back.
Well, he must have been humiliated.
He was humbled.
That was
He was humbled. Yes.
Less is hard, as we say
Biking
here.
just seems
so.
like way too much work for me. It's just way too much work.
Yeah. Well, and I was wondering about that too. I was wondering about when you're running, you're talking to each other. Like you said, unless you're running out of breath, maybe, but you're next to each other, you're talking. A little bit more difficult depending on the ride.
I would tell you actually the opposite. One of the things that I find interesting, and I did 25 or more Peachtree, so I've done some running in my life.
Okay.
But I'll tell you, on the bike, one of the things in relation to the idea of friendships and relationships is, if you ride and not that everybody does this, so you don't have to be able to ride the bike 100 miles, but if you do, that's a 5 or 6 hour commitment of time, and you spend that riding with other people, and it really is a place where you get into, as you were saying, John, serious conversations with people. You find common ground you didn't know you had. You talk about the kids and the problems with raising your kids and the challenges of outside of cycling. So that's one of the things that I think is really a benefit to biking over running, is the fact that you have long opportunities to talk with folks.
So it's not racing necessarily. It's
Some of it
really-
is, but no, not all of it.
Okay.
A lot of it's not. A lot of it is social. it's a very social sport.
Mhm.
So if we go on a 2-hour ride, you know, for 30 minutes of that, those of us who care to be competitive go out and try and win the race up. Within a bike ride, there are races, mini races, right? So every time you come to a hill, there's an opportunity to attack the hill, beat your buddies up the hill, get bragging rights. But in between that, there are those times when you're riding along at sort of at a jogging pace or intensity, and those are the places where you get into conversations about how are the kids, and you know, what are you redecorating your house like you plan to do, and all those kinds of conversations. So
A tremendous amount of time. You don't think about it, but I met with Donna Ezell, and we
Yeah.
talked, and she told me, when you run for 5 hours with someone, it's like he becomes your running husband. You know everything about this person. You know all of his ups and downs, all of his, you know, woes.
Right.
You just really have to bond over a 5-hour conversation running or cycling.
sure.
I must have a lot of wives then.
Do you have a lot of running
I must
wives?
have a lot of wives then, that's right. And I guess none of them would claim me, so.
Is it the same, Prudence, for you? I mean, do you find that, you know?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and it's so rewarding when you're having that conversation, or you're giving some advice, whether it's about work, and then you follow up, whether it's the next week or a few days later. Hey, how did it go? And the person said, absolutely, it worked. Thank you so much. It's just so much.
So-
Other than just the running.
Do you find younger people also trying to join up a little bit with PC3
Sure.
or you know, I mean, what age levels is it normally at?
I have had, in fact, I've had youngsters that could beat a lot of the oldsters that were in their mid-teens come out and ride with us. One young guy that rode with us while he was in high school, and big guy, very, very large guy, but very, very strong, and he rode with us and took off, I don't know, 75 pounds, right? And so I've got kids in their teens, a few. I've got some riders in their 20s. The typical rider is somebody either in their 30s who's a serious cyclist, in their 40s who has discovered the inevitability of bad knees, right? Or somebody that's in their 50s or 60s and even beyond. I've got some folks that ride with us in their 70s, and that can be humbling too, by the way, because some of those riders are extremely strong cyclists.
That's funny. It's like tennis a little bit because I do a mixed tennis.
Yep.
And I never played tennis until 2 years ago. So, I mean, short of, hitting the ball once in a while. But there are 70-year-olds that can place that darn ball where I cannot get it, no matter how hard I try. So I can appreciate what
Practice
you're saying.
makes perfect, Rico.
So they say it's going to take a few years.
Yeah, it's just a few more
on my
years of
part,
it.
yes.
Well, listen, you're all out there, you're running, you're walking, you're cycling. The truth of the matter is you're all on the roadways at some point in your excursion, and you more than others, right? Your group more than others. So let's talk about sharing the road with motorists, and let's talk about measures you take to try to keep your group safe. I can speak for Prudence's group because she ran around. Remember, I wasn't kidding when I said she ran circles around all of us. So we were all running. We were midway through, I think, the journey, and then Prudence decided to run all the way back to her car and all the way back to us. And you brought us what, Prudence, to keep us safe at
the
night?
headlamps, because it's dark.
Yes.
Now in the winter it gets dark so early, and so we need those lamps so that we can see the pavement, the uneven pavement, and cars can see us.
And it really did help. Once, when it's pitch dark out there and you're running by, a forest right beside the sidewalk. We know that there are bears and coyotes and such around this town, so it was nice to have the headlamp. Absolutely.
Does the cycling happen at night also? No.
We do, and again, we're out there on the pavement with the traffic, and so 90% of the time there are paths, but 90% of the time we're out on the public roadways. So as we talked about when we talked before, I do a couple of things. Number one, let me start by saying being hit by a car doesn't feel good, and I can tell you from firsthand experience. Actually, I was hit by a truck and a boat, but if you're a cyclist, you will always 100% of the time lose that collision. You will lose that contest. So what we try and do is we make ourselves as visible as possible. lights, as Prudence mentioned, and beyond that, really, really bright clothing. I have a flashing front light. I have a flashing rear light, lime green, and very, very bright clothing. And then beyond that, it's good to be in a group. So for somebody that wants to try biking out, it's a lot easier to see 20 cyclists than it is to see one. And so that sort of, my buddy said at some point, he said, "I love to ride with you because you look like a garbage truck." And I said, "Pardon me?" He said, "Well, the flashing lights, you've got 2 rear flashing lights and a couple of front flashing lights." He said, "You're impossible to miss." And that's a goal. So
Say more like a Christmas tree, perhaps.
I would have
Tis the
liked that
season.
analogy better. That would have worked better for me, but I didn't get to pick it. But yeah, so it's really important to do that. And then related to that is you as a cyclist or as a runner, you need to pay attention to the rules of the road. You need to understand what the motorist is expecting of you. So learning to ride on the proper side of the road, which not everybody does. Learning to run on the proper side of the road, which not everybody does. Learning to obey the traffic rules. All of those things also help, and just keep you out of a situation where you're vulnerable to.
And a lot of people don't really even know about that. I researched because I was talking to these guys. So as a runner, you're supposed to run against traffic to see the cars coming at
Right.
you.
Mhm.
As a cyclist, you're considered a vehicle and you need to run along with traffic. And I think some motorists might not know that. There might be a sense of sort of like irritation. I got that feeling when I talked to you last.
There is. I mean,
Like, what's this guy doing on the road?
let me say that in Peachtree Corners, it's a wonderful community to ride in because 95% of the people that we encounter out there are cordial, and they not only do they recognize our ride, but they appreciate what we're doing. So people tend to be friendly and cordial and accommodating. You still need to follow the rules though, because even if somebody's trying to be accommodating, if they can't predict what you're going to do, it's not necessarily a safe situation. So it's important that we ride in a way that's following the rules. Example, a lot of people don't know you cannot, by law, you're not supposed to, it's against the law to ride your bike on a sidewalk if you're over 14 years old. And sometimes somebody's aggravated and roll down the window, ride on the sidewalks. Well, in reality, that's against the law. And in reality, you're 7 times more likely statistically to be hit if you're riding a bike on the sidewalk than if you're riding a bike on the street.
Is that right?
Because visibility is more limited, and people aren't accustomed to people going at 20, 25 miles an hour on a sidewalk. So
because you're crossing intersections at that point, even
Correct.
community roads.
People aren't
and
looking
stuff.
for you. Yeah.
Sure. What do some people do? The Comet Trail, which is like
Sure.
50-mile run, and this way you're not even on the public street. You drive to. I know a couple of people that do that. They drive to
I
there.
do that too.
Right.
Sometimes when I want to go for a long flat run,
Yeah.
I go that way.
It
It's
is
just
it is
easier.
a great resource, and the Beltline is a great
Beltline,
resource. It doesn't completely eliminate you still have to watch what you're doing. You still have to ride safely, but it's a good place to start learning to ride because you're not contending with the fact that you've got to deal with traffic as much. You still have, they're cross streets, so you still have to pay attention.
Yeah, for sure.
And people should never assume that because you have the green light or you have to go as a pedestrian that traffic is going to stop. And I've always said just pause, look and see if the person is going to honor that before you go.
It's the same thing for pedestrians, kids crossing the road,
Yes.
especially during school time.
Right.
Because people they want to creep out right in front there and cut through that crosswalks.
Yeah, I always want to make eye contact with the driver when I'm crossing a street, especially if they're turning, and I never step out until I've made eye contact when they know that I'm there. And we're perfectly happy to let the cars have the roads if they let us have the sidewalks. So we've got that deal with them. But there are some great off-road runs too. I mean, Peachtree Corners has Simpson Wood,
Yes.
and you can go back in there and do some great trail running there. Riverside Park down in Roswell. We go down there in the summertime because it's a lot cooler down there and run.
Yeah.
The Big Creek Greenway. So there's some great things,
And
outside of.
Gwinnett County has a lot of great
Yeah,
parks.
it really is.
trails, too.
It really is. I mean, Peachtree Corners is a great area to run in because there's a lot of neighborhoods. You rarely have a problem in the neighborhoods, and we don't have sidewalks in Peachtree Station, but the traffic is slow and everybody can see you, and it's, you know, and then, you know, when you're going along the major roads, there are usually bike paths along the sides or running paths, and so we rarely ever have to get on the road outside of neighborhoods, and it's pretty safe around here actually.
So I know, Randy, you survived your sort of brush with death in that harrowing accident you described to me. That was in 2015.
15, yeah.
And unfortunately, one of your group members was not as lucky, and he was Mike Rachelson.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about his situation and what you guys will be doing to
Yeah,
honor him?
very, very sad situation for us. Mike was a personal friend of mine, and as well a very personal, a very popular member of our group. Recently retired, and as a challenge, he had ridden cross country a couple of times. And this past summer that just ended, he did a solo ride starting in Banff in British Columbia, down the Continental Divide, all the way from Canada to Mexico. Was the route, and Mike found friends along the way, and they rode together. And when they were literally 34 miles from the Mexican border, he was rear-ended by a car in New Mexico and killed. So, you know, I don't want to disincent anybody, because I'll tell you first of all that's a challenging thing to do, is to ride in the open by yourself a lot of the time, and in unfamiliar territory.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, a great loss to our group, a great guy, but he was doing what he loved. I will tell you that. And so, as an outcome of that, we as a group were in the process of putting together an event, which we think is going to be. We haven't set the date for it. Next May, we're going to do a tribute ride for Mike, and we're gonna ride those last 34 miles to to complete his journey for him, and honor his effort and honor his friendship. So, you know, another good example of the great friends that you have in a group like this is, you know, and unfortunately life has changes, but
Sure.
Mike was a great example and a great guy and a great friend.
That touched me deeply when you told me that story and I read about it. And I just wanted to share with, you know, the Peachtree Corners residents driving out there, the motorists, the importance of sharing the road. And maybe some people really don't know. I mean, until I asked you, I really didn't know 100%. What is the proper way to pass a cyclist on the road?
Yeah, it's a good point. Another one of those things that are codified in our traffic law is that in order to be legal, you need to allow a cyclist 3 feet of clearance. And that's not a whole lot. And typically on a lot of roadways, you know, you can do that if I'm on the white line on the right-hand side of the road, and not even leave the lane that you're in. So the law says you need to give the cyclist that you're passing 3 feet of clearance. The law also says that a cyclist can take the lane if we need to for safety purposes. But the thing that I would tell, you know, folks around the community, and I tell people this all the time, is we're not, you know, our intent is to stay out of your way. Nobody wins when we get in your way, so we're not going to take up a road just to take up a road. We stay to the right, we stay on the shoulder. But if you want to pass us and you can't wait until there's a place where we can get over out of your lane, just give us that 3 feet.
You know what that reminds me of? It was in Duluth, the Duluth area, and I saw a police car. I think it was the Duluth police. They were on active duty. I realized later they were actually rent-a-cop, if you will, and there was this huge 20-30 group of cyclists right behind them. And I realized later what they were doing. They had that police escort to be able to wave the array. It was more than 30 cyclists, I think, on the thing, and it wasn't like an event or anything. So, you know, I'm not saying that that's a normal thing. There might have been something going on, but that was an interesting way of doing that. And you know, people do get, you know, they want to take that road and they want to get to where they're going, and because of smartphones now and social media, I've seen people weave through, and I've driven up to them and I've had stupid excuses given to me. One guy, I pulled right up next to him and I rolled down my window, had him roll down his, and I'm like, "What are you doing? You've been weaving since Picnickville Middle."
Oh, no.
And he says, "I'm putting on my socks." And I'm like,
Wow.
"What are you, an idiot?" So,
That was sort of a rhetorical question, though, I thought, in
Yes.
this particular case.
so that's
Oh,
just
my.
one person, but I've seen people do that, and they're looking at their phone, even on the highway. Saw someone today doing that. And it's just,
You know, one of the worst things that when I'm on my bike and I'm riding, and particularly if I'm by myself, where I'm not as likely to attract somebody's attention if they're distracted, right, is to look at somebody coming toward me and see them looking down,
yes.
right? Not looking where they're going, but looking down at obviously their phone in their lap. And one of the things that we do, another safety feature, is that we always advocate that you wear or have on your handlebar a rear view mirror, so you know what's behind you, you know what's coming up from behind. And I've had the same thing happen with people approaching me from behind, and I'm a little extra nervous about that because I've experienced getting hit from the rear. So it's again, my ask is that if you're in your car, drive like the person on the bike that you might not see is your wife, your son, your neighbor, right?
Right.
We're this has been a great conversation. We're at the tail end of our time together. God knows. I think someone said, I don't know, do we have enough to talk about? But there is, that we could go on probably for an hour, but we're at that tail end, so.
All right, so maybe you want to get a head start on your New Year's resolutions, and you realize it's time to combat not only a sedentary lifestyle, but loneliness. And what better way than to join one of these groups or other groups that take place and meet regularly in Peachtree Corners. So if we have listeners and readers out there who want to join your groups, how can they get in touch with you, Prudence? What's the best way?
Well, you know what? since you wrote the article, I've had 2 people reached out to me on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is fine. Facebook is fine. So yeah, you can feel free to reach me.
So
and
Prudence
those
Franklin on LinkedIn and or Facebook. And John, how should they get in touch with the Renegade Runners?
I'll just give them my personal email. You can email me at JohnFervier, that's JohnFervier @gmail.com.
Thank you, John. And Randy, if people want to join PC3, what should they do?
Oh, we're in all the social media channels. So the easiest way I would suggest people go to Google and then Google on PC, the number 3, cycling, PC3 cycling, and that should pull up my website. That should pull up our Facebook group page. I think it pulls up my Twitter feed as well. And my contact number is on all of those pages, so you can feel free to reach out to me. And if you have any questions about anything that we do or whether you would fit in with the group, the answer is yes, but I'll convince you of that if you'll just reach out to me.
Well, this has been delightful, and I'm so pleased to have met all of you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Mhm.
Peachtree Corners residents, if you have wonderful ideas for future stories that we should feature in Peachtree Corners magazine, you could reach me on social media, either Facebook or Instagram, at Patrizia Mauti, PATRIZIA, M as in Michael, AUTI.
Right. And Peachtree Corners Magazine, so you should have gotten this in the mail about a week ago. So if you haven't, please let me know. Come on to Facebook page at Peachtree Corners Life, Facebook. And otherwise, you can visit us on livinginpeachtreecorners.com. And that's where you'll find the digital edition, our other podcasts, like other episodes of Peachtree Corners Life, Capitalist Sage, The Ed Hour, and Prime Lunchtime with the city manager. So feel free, join us, and thank you for being with us.
I so look forward to meeting other residents and working on other stories. Rico's already given me my next assignment.
Yes.
Let's talk about the good things you're doing in Peachtree Corners.